welcome Danny to the show. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I've been a big fan of you and your work in the past, I think since 2016, 2017. So I've watched you grow and I've
Wow.
watched you. Yes, I know, right?
Wow. That's
Social
crazy.
media is amazing when it comes to this, following certain trends, following certain things. So super, super stoked to have you on my podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love
Thank you.
whatever we're going to talk about. We've already spoken about so many different things,
I
so I'm
know.
I'm I'm in it for whatever. So let's go.
Oh, that's awesome. So, can you share your journey and how you got started in the health and wellness or health and fitness industry? And you still in it?
Yeah. Well, so I how did I start it? I mean, growing up, that's all I was obsessed with it. I played college football. I was, I loved my strength and conditioning coach in college, so I was always obsessed with the performance side. And then as I got older in grad school, I started to get into the nutrition side too. Um, not that I didn't, not that I wasn't into it like in high school, but I just followed what my coach said at the time. And it was like, typical old school, steak and potatoes and oatmeal and, a little bit of everything, but it helped me get big. It helped me put on muscle and I was disciplined with it. Um, and then, in grad school, got into, didn't really do much of nutrition, but I did, actually, there was no nutrition um, education in grad school, and it was the master's was in human performance. So you would think that nutrition
Big
has a
part of
part to
it.
play with that. Yeah, but it wasn't a big part. But on just on my own, I was actually another Canadian, a fellow Canadian. What is his name? Precision Nutrition. I forget the name of the guy. PhD, really good guy, sensible. I guess if you had to simplify it, it would probably be, kind of a zone-ish type of diet, but it was basically like, yeah, like 30, 30, 40, higher protein, mid carbs, mid fat. And I I played football in college, and then when I graduated and years later, found myself doing CrossFit. Then that got me excited because paleo. I learned about paleo, and I really started to look at my food choices and the sources of the food. And then I did powerlifting and threw everything out the window and just ate junk for a few months, and then started to feel that pain. And so I cleaned that up, but I was bigger, and I had done powerlifting for like 3 years and done really well with that. And then finally in 2016, I had to pull out of my last meet. It was March of 2016. I had torn my meniscus on my left leg, and I just went on a diet. And at the time, my buddy was a bodybuilder, and I was like, you know what, put me on a diet. And I did a bodybuilding diet. I got really lean. It was miserable though, low fat, and I found myself like with some really bad disordered eating tendencies. Like I would eat, I would get a cheat day, and then that would turn into a cheat weekend. And finally, like I remember saying on Memorial Day of 2016, like, man, this has been like 3 or 4 days of just binging and eating like crap. I feel terrible. I'm lean, but I feel terrible. And I always had a buddy in my ear, just like, hey, you should try keto. You should try keto. And I was like, sounds ridiculous. No carbs, no. But what did I have to lose? I had already hit my goal. And, it turns out like keto worked amazing for me. I started in June of 2016 and did it for about 10, 11 months. Actually, no, 14 months until August of 2017 when I just tried carnivore. And, it wasn't keto or carnivore, it wasn't like, what they are now. But, I just started to learn from Amber O'Hearn and a few other, OGs in the carnivore space that were putting this idea in my head that like, wow, maybe I don't need vegetables to like hit my, cover my nutritional basis. And, obviously I am in a much more balanced place now. My typical everyday is carnivore. Like, so for example, this morning Actually, this morning, no, I did have a sandwich post workout this morning for my breakfast because it was fast. But for lunch, my lunch was basically a chuck eye and a burger patty. And now for dinner, I'm having two ribeyes. So, I had a little bit of carbs post workout. But so, of course, having been out of I was a head strength and conditioning coach for VCU basketball after grad school, but I had gotten away from that, and I had been in medical device, done that for like about 10 years, and you know, kind of reigniting my passion for nutrition. I started a podcast with my buddy Brian, the ketogenic athlete, and then after that, years later, I started the Fat Fueled Family podcast. Did that for several years, and yeah. So, what did I focus on? I usually focused on two major things: performance, like sports performance, and like how can you use keto as an athlete in the off season or in season, and then also how can we improve our metabolic health and our family's metabolic health. And it was all kind of wrapped into one big package where it's like the parenting, the education, the nutrition, and the fitness and the mindset. Those were like the five aspects of it. So now I'm back in medical device after some big life changes in 2022. I decided um, I couldn't carry on with my business because it felt like I was being fake. It was called Fat Fueled Family, and my family was being um, torn apart. So I just basically didn't renew my LLC, and I decided that I was going to go back into the corporate world, and did some tech sales for a while, and now, like I said, back in medical device. So that's my long journey through
Journey.
fitness and nutrition. Yeah,
That's pretty cool. I mean, hey, you know what? We got to start somewhere, right? So
yeah,
going back to carnivore diet, because as we know that there's a lot of misconception, and people are like, "Oh, how can you eat, just meat, and you don't get all the other nutrients from your vegetables and things like that?" So, what are some of the common misconception about either keto or carnivore that you often encounter? Like, what are
I,
yeah, so if you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
yeah. I think sometimes these misconceptions are actually true, and I think it's because of the way, if you have underlying disordered eating issues, it's we shouldn't be looking at life as how can I have the maximum pleasure, like everything about pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. So what you see a lot of the time, and I agree, we shouldn't be having a keto diet where all we eat is bacon and cured meats and sausage and things like that,
Yeah, because
packaged
that's
foods.
unhealthy,
Yeah, yeah, and
especially
and,
eating
and
bacon all the
usually,
time, right?
yeah, and usually, when we do see any type of, it's so hard with any type of study dealing with nutrition to ever be reliable in any way. But like, you could, even if you could see an issue, it usually is associated with like cured meats and packaged foods that we shouldn't be eating in the first place. So that's a big one. The keto diet is not, like Atkins. These people would just eat like just garbage as long as it wasn't carbs.
Right.
And the other thing too is like, looking at things from a net carb standpoint. So like, you'll get a lot of marketing where they'll say 5 net carbs, but there's all types of fibers and sweeteners in there that could
Right.
possibly wreak havoc on your body. Like, I do understand the need, especially in the beginning as a bridge for, you know, things that are going to make it easier because, yes, we do have like cramps and things like that. And a lot of the time that's due to our insulin dropping, causing us to like our kidneys to just excrete fluids. But some of it is also because, there's some addictions, there's some carb addiction there. So, I understand the idea behind like, Coke Zero and, sugar free this and sugar free that. I enjoy that stuff. Like, I absolutely do. I have friends who aren't as, lenient towards it, and I agree with them a lot of the time, and I think it's because people abuse it. Um,
Right.
so, so were you gonna say something?
Yeah, so I also think that the marketing is really it caught up with this whole carnivore and
Oh
the
yeah.
keto, and it's like again, you look at the, you can look at the back of the box and you see everything. It's like, yeah, it has 13 grams of carbs and it's wheat, but then it's got that insulin in it, that or whatever, the fiber in it, that
And the fiber, yeah.
that's it. You're right. So it kind of like, it's very confusing, I find it, for a lot of people. So I always say, as a holistic nutritionist, also to tell people, like, you know what, just eat real food. Just
Yes.
don't eat things
Yeah.
repackaged. Don't eat all that stuff. Just go for the real food that is really good for you and for your body. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways, it all depends if you're like a rip off the band-aid or like a dip your toe in the water type of person. But
Right.
I think, Whole30 is a great place to start. It's not exactly keto, but it's kind of keto-ish. It's how people get into paleo. And I just think that's a really good way for people to start, because it really gets people to focus on the quality of the food
Right.
versus just looking at macros, like keeping your macros under a certain number.
Yeah.
The other thing too is like, people need to eat. So like, you have so many different types of people. You have like the undereaters, who are chronic dieters, who have really bad issues with, leptin resistance, and just their metabolisms are super slow. But then you also have like the people who are the overeaters. I've noticed a lot in my experience with the people I've worked with, that um, just getting them to focus on protein is so helpful, because if there's anything that you should track your protein, for
Right.
so like, if you're trying to, let's say your goal body weight is like 85 kilos, or 100, whatever, 175 pounds, whatever that may be, you know try to get as close to that number in grams of protein. And it doesn't have to be in 2 meals. You could try it in 3 meals or 4 meals
Right.
if you have
Yeah.
to.
Spread it out
And
throughout the day. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
What's your
and you'll
thought
you'll be
on
more satisfied.
yeah, what's your thought on intermittent fasting?
I did it a ton in the beginning. Just like my journey with nutrition, I think as I've gotten older, there's a lot of things that I've changed. So, for example, like, I noticed that I'm more sensitive to stress, and maybe it's also because I'm aware of the stress, and well, but I think it's also more sensitive because I'm older.
Yes.
So so
We do
like,
become a
this,
little bit more sensitive when we get older.
oh my gosh, yeah. And if there's any, like, peri and menopausal and postmenopausal, all the way through, like, they will feel it more. And someone like that, if they're going to intermittent fast, I wouldn't do it on days that I train. I would make sure that the rest of my factors in my life that could be stressful are kept in check. So it's not like, you're not doing like lower, super low calorie diet, low carb diet, and doing cold tank and sauna and intermittent fasting, and then not even worried about their sleep, not getting good sleep. um just one thing that I learned with like my whole deep dive into leptin, like in 2022, which I was so fascinated with, that was, if we look at leptin and cortisol, like, leptin is lowest in the morning, cortisol is highest in the morning. Even if you don't eat carbs, you will have a little bit of an insulin response from a meal in the morning, which, for the purposes of cortisol, is a good thing, because leptin and cortisol have, like, or not leptin, insulin and cortisol have an inverse relationship. So you get that high protein with some fat meal in the morning. You're going to bring down those cortisol levels. If you're that person who wakes up and tired and groggy and goes to sleep tired and wired, that's because it's been so many weeks and years of, like, you know just pushing that cortisol to the limit, and then it drops to the floor in the morning, and then as the day goes on, it gets higher. So, I would definitely suggest, like, having, if you're gonna intermittent fast, do it an early window. So, like, have like a 7, 8, 9 a.m. breakfast, and then finish your meals at like 2 or 3, versus a skip
Your
breakfast and go to
breakfast and
lunch.
then go into dinner
Yeah.
late at like 7 or 8 p.m. Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean it's and then you get into the idea of like, okay, we ideally should be having like 3 hours between our last meal, and even more is better. If you struggle with sleep, you may need even more, like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And not only that, if you look at also having to do with leptin and having to do with like putting our bodies in a fat burning environment, you know, typically, we will only we need 12 hours, at least 12 hours between our last meal and our breakfast, or when we wake up, because if you finish eating at 8 p.m., unless you have a very late schedule and you're waking up at 8 a.m., you're only going to get, so that first 9 hours post meal, and this is really the only time that you're actually burning body fat in the day,
Mhm.
is when you're sleeping, because you will burn fat throughout the day, but most of the time it's dietary fat. It's not fat on your body unless you're really doing something crazy, or doing a distance event. But like, eating, cutting your food off from at 6 p.m., you know, you're really only tapping into your body fat reserves at like 3 a.m., that last 3 hours. So if you're pushing, your feeding window later, you're not getting that benefit. And then you're also getting the other risks of driving cortisol up early in the morning. Because let's face it, how many people intermittent fast, they'll have their coffee. They're going to just
Right.
pound coffee. So now it's like even worse, you're drinking coffee, and sure, you're having fat, but a lot of the time, you know, and I've seen good information on, like, if you're fasting to lower your insulin and getting to a fat burning environment, there's a study that I quote all the time. It's like all the way back in '82. Like, they had up to, I think it was 53 grams of fat. So what is that, like, 450 calories worth of fat without
Right.
triggering an insulin response.
Right.
But it's empty calories. It's no protein. And let's be honest, it doesn't fill me. It does not fill me like fat. I can have, like a fatty 300, 400, you know, calorie coffee. And then I can have like a small piece of ribeye, and it might even be less calories than that coffee. It might be like, if it's small enough, it might be like, if it's like a 5 ouncer, 6 ouncer. I'll never eat that small, but like,
Mhm.
just be like, you'll feel more full, you'll feel more satisfied.
Yeah. 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 So what's your thought of on coffee again, drinking first thing in the morning? Because I think a
I
lot of
try.
people, again, there's a lot of misconception about coffee, right? You have some people, I'm not going to name names, but some people are like, oh my gosh, coffee is it. You have to have coffee when you're doing intermittent fasting and you're on keto and that stuff, right? And then some people are like, don't do it because, it's bad for you. And so, like, so what's your thought about that? Because I love my
Well,
coffee, but I try to drink my coffee a little bit later on.
yes, I love my coffee too, and I love my keto brains. I'm sure I think you guys can get it up there. I'm not sure. Last time I checked, it was years ago. But like, it's basically MCT powder with alpha GPC and
Yeah.
L-theanine and lion's mane, and wow, I love that. And caffeine has been shown to increase ketosis. Like, it can kind of help with ketosis. The factors that I'm looking at are the same ones, like you said, later in the day. You know, if you can't wait 2 hours, then try to wait 45 minutes, an hour, as much as possible, as long as it's not right when you wake up in the morning. Typically cortisol's peaking like at 6 a.m. A lot of people can't afford to wait that long because they're waking up at 4:30 or 5 to go to the gym. I would say try eating like a little bit of that post workout meal before the gym, and using that as fuel, and then finishing that post workout meal and enjoying that coffee post workout. That's always an option. That I think, and if you follow me, that, like, I think it's so important for us to like experiment and just keep on trying new things, and like, oh, I didn't think about that. Why not? Like, who we fall into these things where it's like, oh, here's the keto package. The keto package comes with daily intermittent fasting, and daily coffee with fat in it, or whatever it is. And I just spoke to a friend of mine she's just an amazing person. She's gotten really into the cortisol stuff, and I was like, I was telling her like, hey, next time I'm in your city, like we should have like a non caffeinated drink together. Because I was just messing with her because I know she doesn't like she wasn't drinking coffee. She's like, I'm drinking coffee again. I'm like, awesome. Not because it just shows that we're growing. It shows that we don't things like life changes, things change, and you never know. Like something that didn't work before could work again.
Yeah.
I think that, like I said before, like with especially with women who are in that age range, like peri, perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal. Even having like a starch with dinner, like having like a
Yeah.
sweet potato, is a great way to bring that cortisol down and get them to rest. And as well as, of course, hanging up the CrossFit attitude,
Okay.
where like I love CrossFit, but like I remember I would have clients that would be like, I don't get this. Like when I was 25, 27, 33,
Yeah.
I would do this same workout and I got such better results. And it's like, yeah, but now you're
You're
dipping into like,
45 and it's completely
yeah,
different game. Like it's completely different. I know because I'm a huge
it's hurting you.
CrossFit
Yeah, and I
fan.
love
Yeah, I did
CrossFit.
CrossFit,
Yeah.
but when like next year I'll be 50, and for me it's like things changed so much for me. So again, like when I was even when I was 37, even when I was 40, it was completely different. I would
Yeah, that was the
go five
andropause,
times a week and I would be like, oh my gosh, I'll be in shape. I will be, anyways, it's different. Things are in different positions right now. And you're right, being on keto, I also had to myself change things around because things were not working the way that they used to. So, like you said, I have to have, I go with my cycle, obviously, right? So, like, I eat with my cycle. Um, you know, I have my carbs, like healthy carbs, obviously, like, cauliflower, sweet potato, and so on and so on. I do also eat bread once in a while because, again, we're humans. And it's that, for
yeah.
me, it's that 80-20 rule in the way. But yeah, once you find out when is your cycle, and even if you don't have a cycle, you follow the moon cycle, right? And it works really, really well. But I hear you. It's the same thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, like those, you can still do those metcons, but it's
Yeah,
gonna have to be maybe two a week versus
that's
five.
it. That's it.
And like on those days, yeah, have carbs because think about this, like we are driving cortisol through the roof with these hard workouts. And then we're telling our bodies, guess what? I'm not gonna give you any carbs.
Yeah.
Like what's gonna help bring that insulin down or bring that cortisol down? A nice little insulin spike will
Mhm.
really help with that. And it'll help you. Like I think, there is something to be said about like as long as you are not someone who has been living with insulin resistance your whole life, it's good to keep that pancreas in shape. Like we got that what people call physiological insulin resistance, where it's like your body doesn't know what to do when it eats carbs, and all of a sudden your blood sugar's through the roof.
Yeah.
you know I don't want that to happen every time, like on the holidays or whenever I have some carbs. I want to be able to enjoy carbs. I and so like I said, that this morning I had a sandwich. It was easy. And that was like, okay, I got carbs post workout. I had an awesome workout. But then, like I said, I had, that lunch was, just meat. I was getting hungry like a few minutes ago, and I decided to open up a can of cod livers.
Mhm.
Uh, I hadn't eaten them raw in a long time. I was like, oh, this is not a good consistency. So like when we get off, I'm just gonna grill them up a little bit and then have my ribeyes. But yeah, like be adaptable, and you'll be so happy and so surprised because our bodies, you talked about the moon cycles. We talked like there's yearly cycles, there's seasonal cycles, there's long 7 year cellular cycles where like our that's like kind of our cellular lifetime, where we're turning over our cells over 7 year
Right.
period. So
And this is
all
what's
of these things are
beautiful about
cyclical.
this whole thing is just we
Yeah.
are all so different. that
Yep.
one thing doesn't fit. It's not like a glove where it fits. You know, let's say
Yep.
you're keto and I'm keto. We're completely two different people, and we'll utilize these ketosis or this kind of food differently, right? Or another man, for example, right? So it's like what works for you might not works for the other person. So I love the versatility of the food, right? It's so
I
so
was
so yeah.
I will say though, like for the age that I'm at now, like, and I would say this has been for like the last like 5 years because I've been eating, like consistently keto or carnivore now for 8 years. I can't believe it's been 8 years. The last 4 or 5 years, I find that my body needs to eat this way more. Like, as I age, I think, all of us lose that insulin sensitivity. We may not be as it's like this snowball effect because you're busy or you don't have as much energy, so you don't train as hard, and you don't train as hard because you don't have as much energy, and it's like all of those things are happening and you can't train as hard, so you have to think about these things. Like I used to be able to earn those carbs much better with the volume that I could handle. Like I look at some of these things, like I would do 30 total sets in a workout, and I'm just like, I do like half of that now, you know, and I have to focus on execution more. I have to focus on my
Right.
form and I have to focus on recovery. And but if you don't do that, you're just gonna fight against your biology and you'll never win. You just won't.
Yeah, you can cause more harm than good.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you stay motivated?
Oh man, this is something I'm trying to teach my son. Because now my son is lifting with me, and I'm just so grateful for it. It's so amazing to see it. I think like motivation comes from doing it. So if you want to get motivated, go do the thing. I have like motivated. I could say I'm excited for a workout, but most of the time I'm not really motivated until like I'm a little bit into the workout. Like this morning, I was like, man, I've got a nice back pump today. I'm doing some back today. I'm feeling good. Or like if you're that person who has never been able to stick to a program, sticking to that program is what motivates you. So you have to be able to be like, and my son told me it was, what was it, last Thursday. Yeah, that was the last time that we trained together. He was like, I'm noticing that even when I don't want to go, I'm going. I'm like, man, that is a superpower.
Mm,
You have to just not give yourself. It's the same concept behind why are you going to snooze the alarm? Don't snooze the alarm. Like the more you snooze it, the number one, the more chance you have of being late. Like put the alarm across the room, and the same thing. Put your shoes on and get in the car before you have time to give yourself excuses and tell yourself why you can't work out today or why you're going to start that nutrition plan tomorrow, or God forbid next Monday, because magically things magically happen on Mondays, and they can't happen on a Monday afternoon. If it's like, oh, I you know what, I pigged out on some fast food, I guess this week's done. Or I guess even today, why does today have to be done? Just get back on the horse today. Okay, you messed up.
yeah.
Now eat your dinner and don't correct it. That's one thing that I feel like we've all done. I know I have. And, learning about disordered eating and learning like, man,
Right.
bulimia is not just binging, it's purging. It's literally any type of behavior that you engage in to try to correct the previous dietary choice. So, like, you could say, oh, I'm going to do an egg fast because I picked out this weekend, or I'm going to do a fast, or I'm going to, do some silly thing um, that just causes that wild. I always think of it as like this wild pendulum swinging, like this. It's like binge and purge, or like you know binge and starve. And no, like, yeah, maybe, you know one thing that helped me, because I used to eat really really fast in high school, because I was just trying to get as much weight on as possible, and I would blow past the satiety, and that took so long. And combine that with the fact that my mom would never let me not finish my plate, And I promise you, it's only been like 6 years ago that I realized, and I was like, oh wow, I don't have to finish this plate. I could leave it. I could stop here, you know? So like those things I think are, it's so much more, it's so much more worthy to learn how to do that. Um, and try to instead of that like wild pendulum, it's like that, okay, let me practice some intentional eating. I'm not doing this. I want to know, Danny, why do you want to eat right now? Is it because it's your mom's pie that you love it and it's nostalgic? Is it because it's a social event? Is it because it's 12 o'clock p.m.? Even if you're not hungry, but it's 12 o'clock p.m. All those things are not telling us whether or not we should eat. They're just helping us understand and get a better idea of like, man, what are my tendencies? Oh, I'm eating because of stress right now. Yeah,
Right.
you're damn right. I'm eating because of stress. I'm stressed, and I'm going to eat some food because I'm stressed. Give yourself that grace, but at least ask yourself that question. Because I think it's that lack of intentionality and that lack of conscious thinking around
Yeah.
your eating and stuff, that's what causes like, what happened? What did I do? Like, I was out like 10 minutes, and all of a sudden, like the aftermath, it's like cookies and chocolate and
Yeah,
this,
I
and it's
know.
like,
But we are on such a autopilot sometimes.
yes, yeah,
It's like 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock. You constantly eat, and it's like constantly opening up the fridge, and doing this. It's like you're talking about the conscious eating. I think it's so important to look into this and really realizing of why am I opening up the fridge when I'm not really hungry? Maybe I'm thirsty. Maybe I should be consuming more water than just eating another meal where just an hour and a half I had something to eat, right? So those are
yeah.
very, very important points, to think about.
And I will say one more thing that I've done in the last, like, I would say last 3 years, that it has worked great in my life and in the clients that I worked with, was an indulgence bank. Like, I don't like to call it cheating. I don't like what the word cheating does to us psychologically, but I do like to indulge, and everybody likes to indulge. And so, if I have like a month and I have this indulgence bank that magically gets replenished every month, I got 4 withdrawals that I can make if I want to, and I'll do that once a week. And that once a week, I'm going to indulge, and the only rules for that meal, and it's one meal. It's not a day. It's one meal. There is no rules. Have the burger with the bun and the fries cooked in the seed oil. I don't recommend that, but and then have like the endless chocolate sundae, and then be done. Because chances are that you're gonna have 15, 20 meals in that week, and that's one meals out of
Right,
that's like 5% of your meals. It's very, very little.
right,
It's a
right.
very
But there's no
small
need
amount.
for punishing yourself because I think a lot of
Yes.
people too really put the emphasis of beating themselves up for, not having that ice cream because they're so afraid that they're going to ruin everything. That like, I work with women, older women as well, and lose weight and weight loss and things like that. And I've seen that a lot, that women are very hard on themselves when it comes
Yeah.
to that, and for me, it's like, it's okay, as long as you don't have the whole bucket of, a liter or, like the whole thing. I'm like, that's okay, but you can have a couple spoons. It's not going to hurt you. It's okay. You have to enjoy
Yeah.
life at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think like just try to remember the fact that you are not a bad person because
That's
you
it.
made a poor dietary decision. Like, it's so weird for us to condemn ourselves, you know, for doing something that, yeah, there may be an issue there that we're trying to address with food for sure. But, it's just it's not a moral issue. It's not effective. It doesn't help. And if you are the type of person that, you know, all of a sudden, you have like an indulgence, and then you find yourself like 3 days later, you know, looking up and gasping up for air, because you've let yourself go for 3 days, then that's something that maybe you should talk to with the therapist, like,
Right.
talk to someone about that. That's not something that you can fix with just a better food plan. That's something
Right.
that we have to get under. You have to get into the root cause of that. Like, and as you know, and I just hear it by the way you speak, like, a lot of that stuff is coming from our childhood. A lot of that stuff is
Yeah.
coming from trauma, and it's just that inner child that was, well, however that inner child was hurt, that inner child gets that control and
That's it.
asserts control with that behavior. And it's going to be hard until you can address that and be able to move on. It's going to be very
No, I
hard,
agree.
you know
Plus,
even with
food
it, you're
also
trying
is
to,
very energetic. It has energy. So let's say
oh
if you
yeah,
keep on telling yourself that this McDonald's burger is horrible, it's really bad for me, I can't have it. Well, guess what? It will be bad for you. But
it'll
let's
be
say there's
so bad.
nothing
Yeah,
else to eat and you have to have that burger. You're not going to tell yourself, oh my gosh, I can't eat it because it's really bad for me. It's going to cause issues. No, you have to eat it because you're hungry. You have nothing else
yeah,
to eat. Well,
yep,
yeah, it's gonna, maybe not the best thing, right? The seed
yeah,
oils and all that stuff, but it's food. You're eating it, and it's
yeah,
okay. So it's
yep,
also the mental capacity of what you think about food. How do you treat food? So I think that's a huge also role in how we see food. It's like you go to
yeah.
Italy
I don't know.
or Spain or anything like that. People enjoy their food. It's a
Yes,
social event thing, right?
yeah. North Americans, like, I don't know. I feel like maybe Canadians not as much as people in the U.S., but like we have such a weird view of food. Like it's like this sadomasochistic view of food. It's like I'm in a diet, and then it's like, but then I'm gonna eat like crazy, and so like you know, it's such a, I feel like what we're doing to our brain, of course, you're right. We're also, the way that food is being assimilated is not going to be the same. You may not even absorb as many nutrients versus that meal that you're sitting down with family, taking your time for hours and hours. You had 3, 4, 5 glasses of wine, maybe, you just like you had the bread, a ton of wheat bread with the butter. Then you had the dessert that had like a ton of fat and a ton of carbs, and yet you wake up the next morning, you don't feel a food hangover, you feel
Yeah.
great. Of course, there's also better sourced foods, and but like I think it's a big part of, like, you see people walking down the street, grab a bagel, grab a sandwich, boom, and you're just eating, and you're just in that sympathetic tone,
Mhm.
and you're in fight or flight, and you don't even know it. It may not be like a high sympathetic tone. It may just be enough to where you are just like, it's just that low level stress that you're carrying throughout the day that is not enough. You're not able to bring yourself to parasympathetic enough to where you can digest the food, you can burn
Yeah.
the fat,
Yeah.
you know
It's so
so
true. Very, very true. I love talking about all that stuff. It's so important
oh,
to
me
pass
too.
on this message. But again, it can be so overwhelming for some people. Um, like yourself and myself, we've been sitting in this whole nutrition for quite some time, for a very long time. And, even I sometimes, when I read certain articles, I'm like, huh? I'm like, what? I just have to reread
Did I
it
miss
again. I'm
something?
like, doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. I'm confused. So I mean,
Yep.
for an average person, it could be very overwhelming when it comes to nutrition, and it's hard. So I hope that this message that I'm trying to perceive here will go out there, and people reach out to people like yourself, myself, and whoever to ask for advice, because I think it's so important. And again, like in my approach, always is what my, let's say keto works for one person, again, might not work for someone else. So I can't put all my clients or keto, especially women, because we are also different and our cycles are different, and our perimenopause, menopause is in a different stage of our lives. You know, we're all on different journeys. We're all do different things. So it's quite fascinating to do this.
I love it. I think, the main thing is that people need to like really know themselves, try to learn like who they are, learn like what motivates you, learn if you're like rip the band-aid off and just cold turkey or
That's it.
ease into it. Learn who you can resonate with so that you can actually hear the messages because a lot of people
Yeah.
are talking about the same things. We just deliver it in different packages. We
Yeah.
even the way we look, can make someone just be like, oh, that doesn't know what he's talking about. It's different for you to tell a woman you need to eat more meat than for me to tell a woman you need to eat more meat. They'll just be like, oh, you're just a meathead. Of course you're gonna tell me to eat more meat. You don't know what it is to be a woman, blah blah blah.
Right.
But when you're saying, you know, listen, like this salad only crap is not it's not it. Like you need to get some more meat. And guess what? Red meat. Don't just tell me
Yes.
chicken and fish. It hits different when you do it
Yeah,
versus
no,
me.
I agree.
You know,
I agree. What role does mental health play in an overall fitness industry, for example, because you've been in the fitness industry for quite some time? And how would you address that?
gosh, I think that is most influencers have mental health issues. Like most people who are in a position to teach others have mental health issues. I think we're all kind of like mind controlled in some ways. The way that we're raised. The way that like culture is created, not really by us. And so what I mean by that is like people are being shown how things should be and they just default into that. And so like this diet culture is a very unique thing to the United States. Like we've spread it throughout the world to some extent to the more developed places, but I think mental health is huge. I used to say though, like I remember my buddy Mike Mutzel asked me, like he was in my house and we were recording a podcast. It was like 2017 or 2018, and he's like, what do you think comes first? These deep insights into your mindset and your mental health, or the food, fixing the food. And I still to this day think that you got to get a hold of your food, not in as simple as a way as possible, because you have all this background noise from the blood sugar up and down, from the inflammation, from the aches and pains, from possibly having some mental health issues from maybe some plants that I don't get affected by it. I do get affected by a few things, but I don't have the same issues, the anxiety. Some people get anxiety, some people get depression. So
Right.
I think you got to clean up the diet first, but then you have to understand that like you what you may be thinking or your thoughts are kind of like mostly this repetitive thing that you've been doing, and it's good to get to talk to someone. And I've done that on and off like for the last 6 7 months. And sometimes the person's not worth much. They're not helping you. Sometimes you could tell they're not listening to you, but
Right.
sometimes just saying what's on your mind to another human being and trying to uncover and not lie to yourself about the world you live in, and the way that you perceive the world, I think is so helpful, because a lot of these behaviors are habitual. They're not, the things that like have been wired in, and you can only kind of pull those wires apart and rewire that if you're doing like other type of work that goes beyond the way you eat. You have to be like trying, even just trying to write your thoughts down, like journaling,
Right.
um, all of those things I think are so important, because if not, you know, just ask yourself this, like, what does your typical day look like? If every day looks the same, that's not good. I mean, I understand the importance of like, of having, you know, um, discipline and having schedules. But like, if your day is wake up, eat the same thing, go to work, sit in the box, come home, eat, watch TV, go to bed,
Right.
Like
And then
these are
repeat
the
the
type of
same
things.
thing the next day. Right. Right.
Yeah, and not getting out there, and it's a lot easier not only with the social media, but then also 2020, we basically became atomized, like that
Mm,
social atomization, where it's like I spoke about that at one of the last conferences that I spoke at, like before, actually it was 2022, talking about like we're more connected than ever and we're more disconnected than ever. You
yeah.
know, you if you live in a city, you can easily, like, you might have that person that you go to at the coffee shop, but you don't know their name. You say hi to them, and that's about it. And then you sit in the same place, the same bar, you know, same people around you, but you're not even talking to them. You eat your microwave dinner, or it's just like, but you're on the phone scrolling the whole time, and you're
Yeah.
laughing with friends, but you're not getting that that vibration. You're not getting that interchange, that exchange of like energy that you get from hugging someone, speaking to someone, looking them in the eyes, being outside. So I know I'm just ranting now, but like these are all things that I'm really happy to see in the last couple of years. A lot of people have been focusing on that. Like, yes, let's talk about what's the perfect macro ratio.
Yeah.
Fine, we'll talk about that. But then can we also talk about like we need to sleep and we need to be with people that we love and we need to like
Right.
address our issues, because if not, like we're not going to be happy in our jobs. We're not going to be happy in our relationships. And now all of a sudden, you know, you lost weight, but you still feel like crap.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I believe there's a huge shift happening in
I see
humanity,
that. Yeah,
especially here in North America. I find it. Even here in Canada, there's a huge shift when it comes down to food and mindset and growth and everything. Like it's really cool
yeah,
to see. I'm super excited because I'm going through the same for the past 7 years, all these changes, and I love seeing it, and I'm passing this on to my children as well, so that way it's easier for them to be like, hey, I remember those words from my mom, my dad, or something like that. So I'm super super
yeah. That's the
excited.
dream.
Yeah,
That's the goal.
that's
Because we
it.
can't,
That's it.
we can't control their behaviors, but we can at least get them to think. And that's all I really want to do is like, I want my influence to remind them, like, hey, when I feel like crap, what have I been doing? How have I been sleeping? How have I been eating? You know, versus like, oh, I gotta go see the doctor. I gotta go see the physio. It's like, no. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Well, Danny, is there anything else would you like to add, to again, where people can find you, how people can find you, how can people connect with you, anything like that?
I love the fact that this is my hobby again. This was my hobby for years. You can find me at danny.vega at or Instagram dannyvega.ms. I was about to get my Gmail. You could find me on Gmail too, but I think dannyvega.ms is the best way to. I'm not on all the social medias. I just stay on my Instagram, and I like YouTube. I learn a lot on YouTube and podcasts. But I have a TikTok account. I don't look at it. I don't even think I have any TikToks. Facebook, I'm not really on. Like I only have mental space for one platform. And the way we look at our parents' generation, they're still on Facebook. That's us now. Like we're the old people on Instagram. And a lot of people but I'm gonna stay on my Instagram because it's what I know, and I have a lot of friends on there. And but yeah, any questions, please feel free to DM me. I'm always trying to like stay up to date, like, and keep up with DMs. Like it was a while there where life was too hard and I couldn't even, it was years. I would see someone like would DM me a year ago, and then I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Did you ever get that answer?
Always.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of life,
So,
I guess, right? So
yep.
yeah, yeah. Anyways, again, I really appreciate your time and coming on here, speaking with me, and sharing your journey and sharing about your nutrition, your fitness, and everything. So, again, I really appreciate that. But I will have all the information posted at the bottom of the script, so that way if people need to reach you, they'll have the information there on the bottom. So again, Danny, thank you so much. And
Thank you, Alexandra.
thank you and have a great day.
You too.